What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Everyone says that you have to learn Chinese characters or learn how to read Chinese if you're going to learn Chinese seriously. I didn't believe them at first, but I was getting tired with being illiterate, not being able to go outside and read the billboards or the signs, going to a restaurant and not being able to read the menus properly, or just not being able to read a book or a magazine, or responding to a message in Chinese by a friend and spending 10 minutes sometimes trying to decipher what was being written and trying to craft the message back. I wanted to learn how to read Chinese, so I decided to challenge myself. 30 days of reading the news in Chinese every day. Let's get it. Okay, so let's try day 1 of the Chinese reading challenge. 克沃斯是诗 Oh my god, that's confusing. Whoa, we made it through, guys. Yeah, day 1, we made it through. God, that was difficult. The first couple of days were pretty rough, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know the vocabulary. I was pretty much looking up almost every other character using this great Chrome extension, 中文, which was very helpful, but even then, I didn't understand many of the sentences, so for a lot of them, I would be reading the sentences over and over again, trying to translate it into English. But I was determined to stick with it. If you're anything like me, you probably started learning Chinese because you were just fascinated with those Chinese characters, those beautiful brushstrokes, the calligraphy, and the fact that it resembled and looked like ancient hieroglyphics and pictographs. I was so fascinated I would fill notebooks copying down characters over and over again like a mad person. But I quickly realized that this was becoming overwhelming. I would write a new set of characters and completely forget yesterday's characters, let alone their meaning or their pronunciation. I had no framework, I had no system that was helping me remember these characters. So I gave up. I stopped copying down characters, I stopped focusing on characters, and I just focused on listening, for example, with podcasts and the radio, which is great. And I also focused on speaking, for example, with online teachers, with language exchanges, with locals. And I even practiced typing a daily journal in Chinese using pinyin. I would only pick up characters passively here and there, but I avoided reading like the plague. But as my Chinese progressed, I started learning about the many benefits of learning Chinese through reading comprehension. For example, I learned about graded readers and how beneficial they can be for learning Chinese, and they're essentially, as it sounds, reading material that's graded to your level. I realized that even in English and our native languages, it's usually the kids that read a lot who are the smartest and have the best command of the language. And I also heard of a language study where they compared students who lived in the country of their target language with students who stayed at home but read a lot in their target language. And what they found surprisingly was that after a year, the language level between these two groups was very similar. So I knew that if I wanted to get good at Chinese, like really good, I needed to start reading too. So for this challenge, I chose to read the news because I've always thought of the news as so hard and difficult to understand. And so I really wanted to challenge myself. Maybe I just like to torture myself too, but even though I'd been studying for over a year and I could understand native podcasts to a fair degree, every time the news was on the TV, I would completely be lost, just not understand what they were talking about. It was like a different language, the combination of the professional jargon, the abbreviations, the rate of speech just made it impossible for me to understand. So I thought reading the news would maybe help me decipher this weird and mysterious sub-language of a language. After a couple of weeks of this challenge, slowly, bit by bit, I would see the same abbreviations and the same sentence patterns and words over and over again, and I would start to recognize them and not be immediately stunned into this paralysis. Like, oh, this is what this word means, this is what this abbreviation means, this is what this sentence structure means. I've seen this before, and I started to realize that All these news jargon is just like any jargon. Just like the jargon we use to talk colloquially with our friends is a little bit different than how we would write an article that we would post online, or for example, write an email to our boss. It's the same thing with the news, and with the news they just have their own special fancy news jargon, professional terminology that makes it sound more sophisticated, and it's a skill that can be learned just like anything by reading and seeing the words over and over again. And this is one of the biggest benefits of reading in your target language. This is where this beautiful thing called spaced repetition comes in. I've talked about this before, and many others have, for good reason, because it's one of the best ways to learn anything. Most people talk about spaced repetition with things like flashcards and Anki, but I've tried this and I've always found this method deadly boring. But reading is like spaced repetition on steroids. You get all the juicy spaced repetition naturally, because as you're reading, you're naturally seeing the same words over and over again, but you also see them in the context of a sentence. And not just that, you see them in the context of an article or a book with a greater narrative, which makes it so much more interesting and fun, and which makes it stick better. I find this so much more preferable than the empty, soulless pursuit of Anki flashcards. Just kidding. I mean, everyone learns differently. Flashcards work great for many people. I've heard many good success stories. It's just not for me. And as I was approaching the end of the challenge, I could sense that I was soaking up the words. I was starting to read things faster and faster, and I would understand the article and the sentences more easily. And most importantly, my confidence with reading Chinese was as high as it's ever been. In the past, when I saw a sign in Chinese or a Chinese menu or a Chinese website that I didn't understand, my mind would just instantly blank and I would just give up. I wouldn't even try, and I had this mental barrier, this block, this self-limiting belief that these characters were too hard for me to even try. But reading every day for a month has completely shattered this anxious reflex that I immediately have. I know that if I see some weird character that I don't understand, that I can still try to understand it. I can try to decipher it. I can break down its individual radicals and try to get a sense of the meaning. I can draw from the other words in the sentence and try to build context of its meaning. I can look it up on Pleco. I can do anything other than just blindly giving up. This is the confidence that allowed me to even consider that I could read a book in Chinese. And shortly after this challenge, I actually finished my first book in Chinese, and I'm reading my second book in Chinese right now. I mean, I'm reading very, very slowly, but who cares? I'm reading a book in Chinese. This is something that I never thought that I could do. I tried reading some graded readers, but they were a bit too easy for me. But this is not a knock on graded readers. In fact, if I was starting to learn Chinese today, 100% I'd be using graded readers, just because I've heard so many good things about them. I've heard so many people benefit from them. Obviously, I still have a lot to learn, and I'm nowhere near native level or where I want to be, but I'm learning a little bit every day, more and more. And this 30-day challenge was just a huge boost for me for improving my reading ability, but also improving my confidence, which I think is sometimes as important or even more important than the reading ability and the reading skills in itself. I love these 30-day challenges just because it's such a great way to spice things up or to change up my learning style. And it also just pushes me out of my comfort zone. It pushes my expectations and my self-imposed limits. They always make me better on the other side. They help me build these habits, not only with the skills itself, but also the motivation and the confidence to continue going. It's scary and it's daunting and it sucks at first, but as you get going, it gets easier, and I always find that it's so worth it at the end. So if you like this video, you might like the other 30-day challenge I did with speaking, where I basically spoke in Chinese for 30 days, and I found that it was a great way to improve my Chinese speaking and also my pronunciation. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time. Peace.